This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
In the name of God, amen. Our gospel this morning is somewhat a continuation of last Sunday's gospel, but not completely. In this gospel passage, there are in fact three major parts, and they're very easily distinguished. The first is Jesus arriving at Simon Peter and Andrew's home and being informed that Simon Peter's mother-in-law is ill with a fever. And it is the only mention anywhere in Scripture about the mother-in-law, the only way we know that Peter was in fact married. But it is a healing story, and so he reaches out and lifts her up, and the fever leaves her immediately. Then there is the healing of many from that particular community. And the third is Jesus going off by himself early in the morning to pray, and then saying, let's be on our way to the next place to proclaim the kingdom of God. Mark never wastes words. It's very simple, straightforward. This is what we're doing. But the issue for me is that I personally like to translate that word fever as dis-ease, with a hyphen between dis and ease, because I think it speaks to us much more clearly than fever today. In first century Palestine, a fever, however, could indicate imminent death, something minor, but there was a large range of things. For 21st century folk like us, I think the dis-ease of our world is anxiety. Anxiety. And if it's not one thing, it's another thing. And we constantly go from one anxiety to another. I think down at the bottom, the question is, am I doing it right? Have I got it all in order? But anxiety comes at us at all times and in all places. Now, I found this list online this past week, and it speaks to some of the issue. And it's called the Coronary and Ulcer Club. And I think at some level we are all in it. We could also add pain in the neck, because that's one of the places some of those anxieties go. Just an FYI. But here are the membership requirements. Your job comes first, forget everything else. Number 2, Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays are fine times to be working in the office. There will be nobody there and no one to interrupt you and bother you. Always have your briefcase with you when not at your desk. This provides an opportunity to review completely all the troubles and worries of the day. Never say no to a request. Always say yes. Number 5, accept all invitations to meetings, banquets, and committees, and so forth. All forms of recreation are a waste of time. Never delegate responsibility to others. Carry the entire load yourself. If your work calls for traveling, work all day and travel at night to keep that appointment you made for 8 o'clock the next morning. And no matter how many jobs you already are doing, remember, you always can take on one more. Anybody sound like that? Myself included. But the reality is the anxiety level. The anxiety level. And why I speak of dis-ease. Not at ease with ourself, with our God, with our neighbor. The collect begins, free us from the sins. How often we do those things. But one of the things in the midst of that is something I learned this past week. And it's about those illnesses that confine us, and some of which over which we have no control. Matt Skinner is one of the people I listen to on the blog from Luther Seminary in Minneapolis. And he's in a wheelchair because as a teenager, he had cancer and had to have both legs amputated. But what he talked about in speaking about that was the fact that when that happened, he had his family around him, but his friends from high school and neighborhood, etc., did not necessarily come to visit. And the sense of isolation that comes with that kind of confinement. I kind of learned that firsthand this past weekend. I was not here. I was up visiting a good friend who was superintendent in Banning and then just recently retired as superintendent of schools in Paso Robles. She has a special needs brother and has taken responsibility as her mother ages to make sure he gets to doctor's appointments and so on. Well, on Halloween, he had an appointment and she took her brother. And there was a dog in the office, and Kathy can't resist, and so went to pet the dog, fell, and fractured both femurs in numerous places. So spent the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks almost. She did get out of the rehab center just in time for Christmas. But her sense of isolation, not being able to get on her feet, no weight bearing for 8 weeks at all. But family was there. But that sense of isolation in a situation like that. More recently, it was a parishioner in Banning. And her mother is in an Alzheimer's facility, and her stepfather has suffered 2 strokes, and the boys have taken him to Fresno because they don't want to have to deal. Well, just before Christmas, she fell and fractured an ankle. Now, she'd done the other ankle about 20 years ago, to the point, at one point, the doctors weren't sure they could save the ankle or the foot. And she's been in touch with me, and I know she has a parish family in the Pass area, and I know she has a priest there, but she called. And I've tried to maintain contact, but this past week she called on Friday, as a matter of fact, to talk about her sense of isolation and her sense of being cut off from anybody. And I realize that that is part of my responsibility still in terms of another human being within the community of faith. And how often we sometimes forget that. We seem to think that, well, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to act, I just won't go by. And part of what we need to remember is that as a part of the body of Christ, we are Christ's hands and feet and voice to say we care, to touch as Jesus touches Simon Peter's mother-in-law and raises her up out of that sense of isolation. Sometimes a phone call will work. Sometimes being there in person is really what is called for. But the anxiety of our own about what to say and how to act and all those kinds of things sometimes keeps us from action. But then Jesus also goes away to a quiet place early in the morning to pray. And the importance of that, not only for leadership folk, but for each and every one of us to be reminded of whose we are and who we are as the body of Christ. To maintain that relationship. Because one of the things that anxiety does is that it does inhibit and hinder healthy relationships. And it is about healing and health this morning. And so it is that Jesus understands that. But he also goes on to say when Peter and Andrew and James and John go hunting for him, they're out seeking him diligently. It's not just a kind of, where is he? I wonder what happened. It is a seeking after the lost coin almost. But Jesus' response is, all right, let's be on our way to the next town, to proclaim the good news, to continue the task at hand. And that task is there for each and every one of us. The good news of this lesson is that it is not just about, I'm the only one who can do it and you're the only one. No, we can do it as a community of faith. We get hung up in that, I've got to do it by myself place. And that's not a particularly healthy place. But we're called to be the body of Christ, to reach out to the ill and the infirmed and the diseased, and bring about right relationship, and proclaim again the good news that is our primary task, to do that in the world, not just to one another within the community of faith, but to recognize that part of the good news is to be proclaimed to the world. As Andrew mentioned, the literacy program will not mention St. Paul's, because that's what our calling is out in the world. I'll never forget parishioners at one time saying, well, why do we have to pray for all these people in other places? And I said, well, let's start right at home, because that's what we're called to do and what we're to be about. It is about proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ to the world, to more often the broken world, as a sign of God's compassion and love that continues. And so that remains our calling, to go into those places, to touch people and lift them up, and to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. Amen.